Hey, Trevor in the house. You got Angela. Hello, hello. Angela, I love people here.
Hello, everybody. People are coming in. We'll let them straggle in. That usually happens over the time of the meeting. Just to explain to you what we normally do in the meetings during this time is what we do is that there will be a presentation for 30 to 45 minutes from both Nate and Cornelius, and now that's 30 to 45 minutes, including questions. And then after that, we'll go into breakout rooms where you'll be able to talk with the speakers, ask some questions about the topics, and generally get to know everybody who's in the meeting. What I want to first off doing is giving both Cornelius and Nate's background, in case you hadn't seen it. They're giving you their bio. As far as Cornelius served 8 years as a medical supervisor in the U.S. Army after retiring in 2014. He ran his own real estate brokerage from 2015 to 2019. Before becoming a full-time real estate investor, syndicator, and online educator, as a military veteran, Cornelius brings a keen sense of leadership and dedication to the mission. His specialized education, hands-on experience, and years of successfully participating in the real estate industry have honed his ability to identify promising real estate opportunities and real estate syndicators who will provide an excellent investor experience. He holds a bachelor's in computer engineering from DeVry University and is pursuing a master's in business administration at the University of Dallas in Dallas, Texas. So then giving you Nate's background, his bio. Nathaniel Dodson began his career as an investment broker at the First Financial Investments in Austin, Texas. He then went to law school at the University of San Diego. After graduation, he worked as a financial sales consultant for a wholesale annuities company in San Diego before moving to Las Vegas and getting licensed as an attorney in 2006. He worked at a real estate focused firm for a year before hanging out his shingle as a transactional attorney in 2007. Among his clients were a number of registered investment advisors for which he provided assistance. He and his wife co-founded Dodson Law PC in 2010, and he and Richard Robinette co-founded Dodson Robinette PLLC in 2020. His legal practice focuses on the real estate transactions and financing, mergers and acquisitions, security offerings. He holds a bachelor's in economics from the University of Texas at Austin. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to both Cornelius and Nate and have them go through and talk to you about crowdfunding and how I can help you.
Right.
After you, my friend. I'm just here to hang out.
That was nice. That was nice. Well, outstanding, everybody. Thank y'all for joining this event. And one of the things that you probably heard of crowdfunding on many aspects, but I think it's not very common to by doing real estate itself. Can you hear me?
I can't because it's in the back of the truck.
Why not, man? Put truck up way. Bring truck around. One of the things that, like I said before, one of the things as the market changed, we gotta get more creative far as raising capital. And a lot of people, I think, raising capital is one of the things that it's like one of the skills that we all need to do. But one of the things that we done in the past is always deal with credit investors and deal with a smaller portion. And I think crowdfunding is a vehicle that a lot of people sleep on because they really don't know much about it. A lot have changed over the years that allow it to be a strong vehicle that we can add to our toolbox of capital raising skills to raise more capital. John, if you're able to mute some people as we speak, it'd be great as well.
Gave them enough money to pay rent.
No problem. Who paying rent, man? We paying rent here. Go ahead, Nate. So one thing I wanted to bring, not only for myself, but I wanted to bring Nate on because of he actually the legal specialist in the crowdfunding special. And a lot of times people have questions about how can we do it and how can we legally be compliant. Before we try to talk about how to use it particularly, I kind of want Nate to kind of give you the legal aspects in the background about what he knows about it, and then we kind of get more in details. But before so go ahead, Nate. Go ahead and take over.
Sounds good. Well, it's, I like to make these kind of presentations a little bit more interesting because we're going to talk about the most exciting part of anything regulations and the law. Yay. But if you have any questions as I'm talking along, or even to kick it off with raising capital, bio, you got that already, but what it didn't include is I've raised millions of dollars myself. I was a syndicator. I've been part of the GP side of about 4,000 multifamily units. when we're talking about making deals happen in this space, been there, done that, and now just have a good time at it. So any questions y'all have, throw it on the chat, and I will just kind of do a little teach and tell while we're going along. And start with, this is all educational, it's not legal advice, so we'll get into that. I do run a law firm called Crowdfunding Lawyers. And what we do is really, we focus on almost exclusively the securities, raising capital, and we're one of the few firms that do the real estate deals coast to coast. So know what we're going to be going through. With this, why is it actually important? And if you didn't know, you can go to jail if you don't raise capital properly. It's one of those, you got to be smart. And I say that, but let's go to the extremes. Madoff, we all heard about him. He cheated thousands of investors out of billions of dollars. He went to jail for life. I actually ended up being an expert witness for the FBI, SEC at one point. There was this guy that ran off with about $10 million. He ends up getting 80 years to life. Now, if you just kind of forget to do a filing, or if you don't have the perfect things, there are risks there, but don't worry, you don't go to jail for those types of things. But there are the possibilities of fines, getting cease and desist. The real risk of that is if you get a cease and desist, if you get some audits, investigations, not only can it be painful to get through, expensive to deal with, but also it may actually restrict you from being able to do deals in the future. So long story short, just making sure that you're doing everything right. Really, that comes down to make sure you're getting good guidance, whether it's us or any other attorney. Just make sure that they've got experience in the space and know what they're doing in terms of raising capital. When we're talking about crowdfunding here, we're talking primarily about how to raise capital from, well, the masses. There is, and traditionally, raising capital has been under Regulation D. That's gone back to the 1930s. Before 2012, you couldn't advertise. I mean, there was barely online. You couldn't do seminars. You couldn't talk to anybody that you didn't actually know. Are there any current investors we know of that are facing jail time? I don't know who you know, but I can tell you that there is a nonstop lineup of bad actors. So it's always important to make sure that you don't fall into that pool of problems. But even, and this has been kind of a tough year in multifamily and real estate, we all know that. But even with some of these rumored $200 million portfolios that are going down, it doesn't matter as long as these sponsors and management are doing what they're supposed to do. Meaning the right disclosures, the right communications, the right fiduciary duties. If you're raising capital from investors, you are their fiduciary. What that actually means is you have to act reasonable with their best interests in mind. If you, and I know so many of these operating rooms says, well, we waive and we don't have any fiduciary duties. I can tell you straight out that does not hold up in court. You have to take care of your investors. They have to be kind of the number one priority. And as long as you do that, you can lose hundreds of millions of dollars of investor capital. You're still not going to jail. You just have to make sure that you're doing it right. You know, I was practicing securities back in Las Vegas at the Great Recession, 2008 to 2010, 11-ish. And at that point, every single real estate deal that I had represented went belly up. It was, real estate went down 60%. There was nothing that could have been done. But I will tell you that not a single one of my clients that did all these deals, nobody went to prison. In fact, very few, I think there was only one lawsuit out of hundreds of deals. And that one lawsuit, the plaintiff, the investors actually lost, even though they lost all their money in their investment, but the guy had actually done everything right. And as long as you do that, there is always risk in investments, and it's not your obligation to guarantee any investor's money. Hopping back to crowdfunding, you used to not be able to do crowdfunding. You used to not be able to advertise and market to the masses. That all changed in 2012, and nowadays crowdfunding is kind of the way to make deals happen. There's really, and I'll touch on two major regulations that we rely on a lot. There's a couple other different ways to do it, but the easy, the smart, the way that these multifamily or smaller deals happen. Number one is through Regulation D 506C. That's actually a newer law since 2012. And what it says is you're allowed to raise as much money as you need for your investment deals. You can advertise, you can market, you can send it all around everywhere, as long as you only accept verified, accredited investors. The verification process, that just means that somebody that's not the investor is verifying that the investor actually has $1 million net worth, or they're worth at least, making at least $200,000 a year, $300,000 if they include their spouse. To give you an example of when that really happens, well, if you're making $150,000, you're not accredited. But if your spouse is also making $150,000, all of a sudden you're both accredited. That's one of the few times, or hey, you don't have a job, but you're married to a physician making $300,000 a year. Everybody's accredited. But what that means, and it's so important, is that you're a millionaire net worth wise, but not including your home residence. That actually was a change that happened over the last 15 years or so. Happened because all of a sudden everybody in California was a millionaire, and they couldn't allow that to happen. In fact, in the United States, about 10% of America qualifies as accredited investors. So that means if you're relying on this Regulation D, the crowdfunding option, you are targeting and working with the top 10% of the wealthiest of America, as long as you do the verification. But I will tell you, the verification, it can sound like a big pain. It's really not. Nowadays, the verification 90% of the time happens one way. A letter gets sent by their CPA that says, no, Mr. Smith is an accredited investor. There's other ways to do it. You can ask their attorney, but us attorneys, we love to say no. You can ask their financial advisor, but their financial advisor, guess what? They've got other investments and opportunities for them to invest into. Everybody always goes to CPA. It is hands down just the easy way to make it happen. Now, that's the Reg D, which is a very traditional, most traditional private securities. This 506C is the newest way to raise the capital. But then lo and behold, they actually came out with a regulation crowdfunding. We're going to call that Regulation CF. With regulation crowdfunding, it's the new animal, but all of a sudden you can capture that other 90% of America. Through this regulation, 100% of America that's at least 18 years old can invest into your deals. And there's not a limitation. There's not like that 35 non-accredited investors. No, it could be 3,500 non-accredited investors. I don't encourage you to have 3,500 non-accredited investors, but you can. And those guys that say, oh, I'm just going to raise money $100 at a time, that's ridiculous. Now, with Reg D, if you've been doing deals, you know that, hey, the minimum investment tends to be around $50,000. With regulation crowdfunding, the minimum tends to be around $5,000. So you absolutely end up with a whole lot more investors. But there are some limitations on how much people actually can invest. Now, yeah, there is a $5 million per year cap. It doesn't sound like a lot in the multifamily and the real estate space, but don't worry. There's some strategies I'll talk about that you can almost ignore that cap entirely. But when it comes to how much people can invest, if they're just accredited investors, just like the Regulation D, there's no limitation on how much they can actually contribute. If they're at least have a net worth and an income of $124,000, weird number, then they're capped at 10% of the higher their net worth or income. I would say 10% is a good rule of thumb to play by no matter what anyways. There are some states that have real caps saying that you cannot accept or invest more than 20% of your net worth. And it's an issuer responsibility. So you can't accept more than 20% of someone's net worth. That is the law in some states, but not all states. In terms of that rule of thumb and what the SEC actually likes, this 10% is a pretty reasonable number, best practice across the board. But if somebody doesn't have at least $124,000 in net worth, they're below that, either their income or their net worth. They can still invest up to 5% of the greater of their net worth or income. To put it into context, if somebody is a net worth of $50,000 or $500,000, which isn't a whole lot nowadays, they can still be investing up to 25%. $50,000 if they also have an income of at least $124,000. So there still are some reasonable limits, but at the same time, and it's been the saying forever, don't let non-accredited investors invest because they're the biggest pain. And that honestly has been the case before this regulation crowdfunding, because you're asking for somebody to put in a minimum of $50,000. That's a huge percentage of most people, unaccredited investors' net worth. They're scared. They're worried. They're a pain. Now, all of a sudden, they can invest $5,000, $10,000. They're not contributing their whole savings, their whole nest egg. They're less concerned. They're not bullying you on the phone so much. So it's a way to actually make your life a little bit easier. Also with this, oh my God, what would I do if I had 100 or 200 investors? Well, you're not picking up the phone. There are best practices in everybody that is doing real estate deals. I don't care if you have 1 investor, 10 investors, 100 investors. Best practice is always, you should be reporting to them quarterly. It may not be a legal requirement, but it's absolutely a best practice business requirement. And when I say you got to be sending out these notices, it may just be a page or two of here's what's happening around the property. Providing the rent rolls or a financial statement gives that transparency to the investors to really allow them to understand what's going on, whether it's good or whether it's bad. The transparency and honesty will help your business grow, even in a down market. I know that a lot of deals that we look at nowadays, you're raising 10 million, 15 million. You're raising massive sums of money to make these deals happen. So regulation crowdfunding does have that $5 million limitation. So that's where traditionally, I mean, it used to only be $1 million. Completely unusable regulation. Regulation A, another crowdfunding regulation. It used to be $5 million. It used to be the size of regulation crowdfunding, but you actually had to go all the way through a review and qualification process with the SEC. Now, all of a sudden, that gets bumped up to $70 million. That ends up being the big granddaddy. Reg D kind of fits in the middle, and regulation crowdfunding is still the smaller one. However, you can run side by side a Reg D 506C side by side with the regulation crowdfunding offering, both going into the same property, both going into the same company. And now all of a sudden, instead of thinking, oh, I can only have 35 non-accredited investors, no, you can have up to $5 million in non-accredited investors, but you can raise the rest of the capital, another 5 million, 10 million, whatever you got to do and accomplish. You can still raise those monies from the verified accredited investors. So really, at the end of the day, I kind of see it as the traditional regulation D rules was, you can't advertise, you can't market, you can't post it online, but you can accept an unlimited amount of money from up to 35, including 35 non-accredited investors. And that actually still is a rule, Regulation D 506, subsection B. 506B is how it's referenced. That's the old way of doing things. And then now the new is, well, if you run these side-by-side offerings, you can raise the capital from everybody. You can market and advertise everywhere. There just has to be that process of how you direct the investors in where they're placing their money, how much they're investing, and what information is being provided. And that is where the good old-fashioned Cornelius comes back into play as being one of the most important guys in the world. However, let me just throw this out there. For anybody, if you do have questions that you didn't feel comfortable throwing in chat, and I'm going to hang out in the breakout rooms, I do have a book on, hey, this is how to structure your deal, how to get it launched, how to get going. Offered to y'all for free. Go ahead and jump on this QR code, or feel free to email me anytime.
Good deal, man. I
Cornelius,
like that.
back to you.
Can you hear me, Nate?
I hear you.
Outstanding, man. As I said, so real quick, just I want to kind of highlight on the last part you said as well. Now, a lot of people have been doing is doing a 506B and try to switch to 506C. What you're proposing is that they already go with the 506C and just combine a Reg CF combined with it. So this will save them time and effort, because now you can market to everybody at one time, right? And just filter the non-accredited investors to one side by doing the same procedure process, right? When I come in, you ask a question of what? Are you a accredited investor or not? And what you do is kind of filter them accordingly. I'm hearing properly, right?
You nailed it. I mean, there's without a doubt, if you're raising a bunch of capital from friends and family, you can still do that traditional Reg D 506B and then switch it to a 506C, but now you're absolutely limited to those only accredited investors. Mm-hmm. But if you're having to do, or if you're wanting to do that switch to get beyond your own network, you're really limited to that 10% unless you do that combination CF 506C.
Good stuff. Anybody got any questions before we begin? Before we kind of yes. Hello, Matthew.
Hey, thanks, Cornelius. Hi, Nate. I actually met you in the Prosperous Sumas meetup a while back with Jason and Angela. But anyway, I want to ask you what your take is, how all this applies to folks that are creating funds and funds of funds.
Funds of funds, there are some restrictions where there's a lot of ambiguity, and we're reading this ambiguity in our favor. With regulation crowdfunding, there's a restriction on investment companies, technically a restriction on securities funds. A couple of exemptions to securities funds: real estate. You're buying real estate, so it doesn't fit the Investment Company Act under its regular terms. So you can still do a fund. However, that fund of funds If you're raising capital into a fund and you're buying bits and pieces of other LLCs and other syndications, you're actually not allowed to do that because that really is a traditional investment company. There are limitations there, and there's actually a ton of rules around doing fund-to-fund type structures. So be very careful and make sure that you're working with an attorney that actually understands the Investment Company Act. Because I got to be honest, a lot of the securities attorneys, they just don't know.
Investment companies acts.
Yep, there's an Investment Company Act, and the Investment Company Act is specifically there to regulate funds and how they operate.
Okay. I think that answers my question. Could I hypothetically create a fund which would allow Reg CF and 506B and C folks to invest all at once, all together?
Yep. It's totally different. The Reg D, Reg CF, all that is under the Securities Act, the way that you raise the capital. Now, if you're managing a fund, the other side, that's the Investment Company Act. And that's where I was saying, if you're buying other securities, you're buying other interests in other companies, there are limitations. But as long as you're buying real estate, there's an exemption from the Investment Company Act specifically for real estate. So I know it's kind of a fine line difference, but as long as you're doing a real estate fund, no problem.
Okay, so it's on par with going directly to, okay. All right, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Hey, great question, man. Yeah, question, Mercedes?
Just stare at one another.
All right, so one thing I want to talk about is like with crowdfunding, right? So a lot of people actually think that crowdfunding is an actual fund, right? And can you kind of go deep in that? That's not an actual fund.
It's literally exactly what I was sharing with Matt. Regulation crowdfunding, it's like a verb. It's the act of raising capital. There are rules around how you ask investors, solicit investors, market for investors. That's where regulation crowdfunding comes into play. The actual fund part, if you're doing a fund, that's an investment company. But it's also, there's not a limitation. You don't have to do a fund. In fact, there's restrictions on doing a fund. You can do syndications. We will do kind of series offerings where just pretending like you're buying single family homes. It can be set up where different investors have interests in different homes, all under one overriding umbrella. So there's a bunch of different ways to slice it. But as long as you are syndicating real estate, funding your business, or doing a real estate fund, then regulation crowdfunding and crowdfunding actually works for you.
Now, one of the things that I experienced, Nathan, please close your ears on this one, Nathan. That a lot of times people raise a lot of times people raise capital. They usually try to get co-GPs to say, hey, you bring in $1 million, you bring in $1 million, bring in $1 million, and so forth, right? We've seen it around the market. The one thing about crowdfunding is it allows you to raise up to $5 million among yourself. Now, I'm not sure about you, but a lot of times with 506B, you can use your family and friends. Say you're trying to raise $1 million. That means you got 35, you limit to 35 people. You got to find 35 of your family members to give you $28,000. I'm not sure about you, but I can't find 35 of my families to give me $28,000, right? But however, could I find 1,000 strangers to give me $1,000 in order to raise $1 million, right? So that allows me to raise $5 million among myself, or without trying to get more co-GPs on board, which you see a lot of times as well. So I think that using Reg CF allows you to kind of keep more of a GP pot yourself, and raise more capital easier, because why you have a public platform. And the thing about it is a lot of times when you're dealing with investors, it's more so about trust. It's not more so binary. It's about how much do I trust them? Do I trust them enough to give them $50,000? Do I trust them enough to give them $100,000? But I trust them enough to give them $5,000 to see how the deal works. Do I trust them $1,000 to see how the deal works? And I think many of us as investors, or many of us as pursuing GPs, we don't mind investing in other people's deals, because I think that essentially we all want to be LPs. I think we all want to sit back, put $1 in, and get $2 back out. We all want to make our money work for us, but we don't have the trust to put $50 into somebody else's deal or $100 into somebody else's deal. But are you willing to put $5,000 or $1,000 into somebody else's deal to see how it works out and to see that passive income coming back and forth? So I think having raised CF allows you to build your investor base broader, because of why you open yourself to more investors, right? So that means that you have to trust them. They don't have to trust you as much, but also they trust you enough in the deal to get involved as you're doing public platforms.
So I may have heard you say the 10 different GP things. So I will jump in there for just a second and at least throw out the little warning, because of course we're aware, we help groups, and the GP team just seems like it's growing more and more. As the purchase price goes up, all of a sudden we've got 10 GPs all trying to work on a deal. There is a rule on, they call it the issuer exemption, what it takes to raise capital without being licensed. And it does, and here's what the rule is. As long as you're not getting paid for raising capital and you have obligations to the company, material responsibilities, substantive responsibilities that continue after the capital raise, no problem, you can raise capital for your deal. When we're talking about a real estate syndication, there's only so many responsibilities, and as those responsibilities get chopped up more and more and it keeps getting a little bit more remote, I will say it keeps getting more and more risky. Chopping it up into 5 people, that sounds horrible, but no, absolutely it can work, creating 5 different positions. Everybody gets out there, raises the capital, making it happen, meeting the requirements of the issuer exemption. Once you get into, hey, we just need another 5 GPs, we need another 10 GPs, it gets to be more and more risky. And that is where doing something like the crowdfunding, and where you're out there actually marketing openly without relying on every GP to bring $1 million, it really actually helps protect you. So it is something to really pay attention to. And this is the case always with raising capital, and you all know this. Your best investors are the guys that already invested with you. So you're building that audience, you're building that investor base so that you're able to keep doing more and more deals as you're moving forward with your investor career.
Good. So one thing I want to give y'all an example of something in real life, right? So this is one of the people that are raising capital on our platform, right? This is 3 Keys Community, right? They're buying 233 units, actually in Las Vegas. And what they have done is they have created one for non-credit investors and also credit investors. So the total raise was $17 million. So you're raising $5 million through the crowdfunding portal and $10 million through the 506C. So you get the details of the information and so forth. They have the details, and they also have different classes that they offer of investments. So let's do it. So even if you go on a page, Investor 3 Keys, you click here in credit investor, right? I want to do that. So that go back. So credit investor, go to their next program. Also, if you click here, it should go to their crowdfunding page. And you see right now, so far they have raised over $1 million through crowdfunding, right? Over $1 million through crowdfunding. It don't say how many investors they use, but their minimum is $5,000, and they was able to raise that on investors that have not been invested before. And the great thing about it is that if you look down here, some of the testimonies that people who actually invest in a deal, that one thing I like about it, because of you see how people were saying that that they were able to use a 401k, because a lot of times people have a 401k but they can't use it on a credit investing deal. But they have the opportunity to invest in these opportunities was what they enjoy. Somebody trying to talk like me, who that? So it's one of the things that, cause like you see how people are excited to be able to get involved in investing in real estate by themselves. So because the opportunity that wasn't there before is now available to them. So it's one of the things that a lot of people be surprised to see that even when raising capital, like a lot of times people be afraid to ask for capital because they're afraid of the question of, well, if the deal's so good, why haven't you invested into it? Because we all say skin in the game, skin in the game, skin in the game. But however, if you're not a credit investor, how can you invest in a deal? You can't many of these deals if you're not accredited and so forth. So it kind of get rid of that that inferiority or that bypass of you being inauthentic because you can't invest in your own deals as well. So it allows you to actually invest in other deals, but also allows you to be who you say you are sometimes. So that way you can go out and raise capital because why you say, yes, I invested before in real estate as well because I am an investor. That way you can raise capital with the integrity that you are doing it yourself. That's one thing I like about it. All right. Who got questions? Who got questions? Who team won Super Bowl? What's going on? Give me something.
I mean, I will say, so another thing to just consider, there's a $5 million annual cap on the regulation crowdfunding. But to use that 3 keys as an example, they raised $1 million. They shut everything down. They're done funding. Their next deal, they can still raise, $3,952,000. But it is an annual cap, so it's not a per deal cap. So instead of that 35 non-accredited investors, you just have to think most of the investors are still accredited. They'll still come through the regulation D. But throughout the year, you can bring in as many non-accredited investors as necessary, so long as between all of your deals, there's $5 million or less in that non-accredited money.
So then after that year, what happens, Nick? Tell them what happens after year's up.
Year 2 starts and you got another $5 million that you can continue to raise. That's where you're growing your investor base and your audience. It gets into the next deal. They can invest. It gets into the next year. It starts all over again. So it is a ongoing limit that starts whenever you start your first deal.
Okay, I think that's a good. So I think that's one of the things that I like about it because of you can add to your arsenal of raising capital. You have more tools now in your belt. For those individuals who can't invest in other people's deals, they can invest in your deal because why you offer another opportunity as well.
I see that
Right.
Angel mentioned that some lawyers won't rep the big operating teams. And it is true, and any attorney that knows what they're doing is asking, great, here's the GPs. What are their roles? How do they meet this issuer exemption? Because if they can't, they're basically paying unregistered broker dealers or hiring unregistered broker dealers. And that can end up being a huge liability. But the huge liability, it's not like you go to prison, but it is like you're guaranteeing the investor's funds. You may be subject to some fines. Don't hire or don't just start paying people to raise capital for you. It just creates undue risk.
And one thing that I know, like the $5 million thing that like a couple years ago it was 1 million. Now it's up to 5 million, and they even talking about raising up to I think even 25 million as well. So the number is talking about raising. Now that number is talking about raising, but they're also talking about making the threshold to be a credit investor come more harder now, right? I think they trying to minimize the people who actually qualify to be a credit investor. So your pool of investing is getting smaller and smaller. But I think that the Reg CF is a good option to allow us to continue to raise capital and continue to build our best list as we continue to kind of do business as real estate investors or even businesses as well. You can crowdfund anything. Okay.
Definitely the path in the future And it's been a tougher market to raise capital in, but here's the untapped market is the other 90% that hasn't been investing, hasn't been dealing with the higher interest rates. So there's still plenty of room and opportunity to grow with it.
All right. Anything else? How does one pay investors back?
If you have to pay, if there's a right of rescission that you cannot afford, it is a debt that can follow you to the grave, meaning there is no bankrupting out of it. It is a debt that is owed if you do not raise capital properly.
So I think so real quick, William. So make sure I say code. So you say how does one pay them back? So make sure that I understand you properly. The question this is just as if you do investment for any other regulation, just like a Reg CF or a Reg D. It's not anything different from any ordinary offering that you had before. It's just that you give a different permission to advertise to more people. So how you pay them back the same way you do your other deal, from the proceeds of your investment to your own deals. Just that you have a different structure. Cody, you said how often or what kind of deals might be scaled on cold audience rather than a personal list and following. For example, I'm not sure if you follow my platform. I run a group called the Deal Room, kind of like Shark Pool, Shark Tank, right? And one of the things that I tend to try to target are those individuals who actually already bought a course, but still believe that that multifamily is a great vehicle, but however they have not done their own deal before, or they have not, it's still in that 10%, the 90% of people who have not done their first deal are still believe, or part won't be GP, right? Because if you see a lot of these guru groups, you may go, I went to one time I go to the guru groups, coaching groups, you may have 1,000 people in the room, right? And say, well, this 5% actually did a first deal last year. So what happened to the other 90%? They still believe in multifamily, they still want to do it, but they haven't did it yet. I go after that group. They already believe in a multifamily. They already they already believe the asset. They already understand the asset. So I go after that group to say, hey, how about multifamily, but a different way of doing so, right? You know that the Reg D or credit is not working. Let's try another way as well, but you still believe on the same path. So I think that being in that environment allows you to talk the same language with them because they already going on a path that you taking them down, right? Hey, you want to invest in a deal, but you can't because of you're not a credit investor. Try this route. Greg, what's going on? Got a question. What's going on, Greg? With great question, Cody, and great question, William. Thank you.
Hey, good evening. Thank you so much, Cornelius. And where's Charles? Charles Hamilton, thank you for inviting me to actually attend this right here. See quite a few faces. So my name is Greg Dion. I'm a fund manager and a 506B fund manager. And so my question is, with regard to crowdfunding, what are some of the things that we had to look out for as individuals, even if we decided to actually become fund managers as a crowdfunding fund manager or anything like that, to be able to help our investors understand the different kind of schemes that are happening that is actually putting a black eye on the whole industry itself. And so what should we be prepared for so that we can help people to understand, and also to go back to the question that was asked before with regard to how do you pay it back? Is it wise, just like on a regular fund, that we actually have shares per X amount, and one share per X amount? Is this the same thing for crowdfunding as well?
So crowdfunding is looking for soliciting the investors. But in terms of those bad actors that give a black eye to the industry, nothing changes. It's the same risk before as it is today, but actually it's lessened because now there is actually required disclosures. Now there is required reporting. So there is information that is required to be provided so that it's not the black hole of the past if you just throw in money and it disappears. And the biggest risk is people are just like, oh, well, I'm going to go buy this land and then I never communicate with you again. You're not allowed to do oil and gas. Wonderful. there's a lot of scams that are oil and gas. You've got an issuer that buys a well for $1 million, sells it to investors for 5. I literally won't represent a mine deal because I've seen so many scams revolving around mines. So there are always at risk. It is important for everybody to do their due diligence. The PPMs, that's a great place to start. But also, if you're looking to invest with somebody, search them online. See what background information you can actually gather, because oftentimes you don't know until you actually do your search, but nothing has changed in terms of the risk of investing with anybody yesterday compared to today.
Also want to add, because usually the common ways to rate people raising capital is through the main 3 regulations, right? You have Reg A, you have Reg D, and you have Reg CF. You're probably hearing about right now. Now the thing about it is Reg CF is a regulation. Now usually some people raise tell me that you gotta comply by different rules from the SEC, like background checks. You gotta apply, like I said, because of usually if I was B, if I was C, you're doing exemptions to the rule. So it allows you to kind of bypass the rules and like I don't need to do a financial audit, I don't need all that stuff. The Reg CF, you gotta do a financial audit, so it's a background check upon your company and also you as an issuer. So it gives you more weight to saying, hey, the SEC kind of approve of me of actually performing this as well. Then you have a portal to do a background check, so you have a little more transparency as an issuer to offer your deal. So if that deal goes south, more people are on the line of that deal getting going after you as well. So it gives you a little more trust because you got more hoops to jump through before you get your offerings to the public. So that it can go as well. So what that says, so even using crowdfunding with a fund, the issue that I've seen before, to be honest with you, is when using fund because of an audit has to be done. So usually with syndications, you start a brand new company for that specific property. So you're doing an empty audit of a brand new company. However, with a fund, you have to audit everything you have done so far in the audit, which can be very costly through a CPA. So one thing I do want to tell you about, if you do consider a Reg CF with your fund, think about how many deals you have done before, and all that have to be audited, and your CPA gonna have to charge you for that each time. You know how CPAs do sometimes, they kind of charge you. But if you're doing a brand new company, it's an empty audit, it's basically zero, so forth. However, it's less expensive to do an empty audit opposed to an audit to a fund who's been operating for 2 or 3 years. It's kind of the real thing that I consider and so forth. That answer your question,
There's been
Greg?
a recent rule change over the last couple of years that all funds are going to be needing audited financials. So that's just something to be aware of.
That answer your question, Greg?
Thank you, Nate. Yeah, thank you very much. Again, I showed up a little late, but just went to capture some information and hopefully get some very good nuggets. Thank you.
Thank you. No worries. Richard, you said a question about, do you recommend a minimum doors to be the first deal or no less than how many doors be recommended? I've heard less than 16 could be considered suicide. Is there a certain strategy? To be honest with you, it really depends on you, really, because of everybody does things differently. My first deal was over 16 units because of I felt as if that it was safer to me to present a property over 200 doors. I thought I thought people wanted to invest in bigger deals, right? Because I did it because of I was co-GP on another deal. I said, hey, this deal look good. My investor might like this deal. Let me be a part of the deal. I can help raise capital and also do other tasks with this property. So I think that on your first deal, you gotta figure out what's your plan on your first deal? What do you want to do on your first deal? Because I'm saying raising capital for 16 doors, it may be kind of hard because the question is who's gonna manage it? Who manages that property? If you don't have the money to manage it, then what can you do then? Then now you become more risky because of you don't have the funds to actually manage it.
Like between a 10 and a 12 cap, basically, is where I think I would want to be. Is there a minimum like doors that you would need to have to accomplish that?
So to answer your question fairly, it depends, to be honest with you, because of the way raising capital kind of come in 2 parts, I think. First is acquiring your list, investors, people that can give you money, right? Second part is actually them giving you money, right? So I would say, I say save your ask, right? ASS, right? First, you attract investors, what you're looking for. Ask them what they invest in, then you go shopping for them. So the question is what would they give you money for? What they give you money for a 16 unit? What they give you money for a 30 unit? What they give you money for a 1,000 unit property? So it depends on what your list would give you money for, then that would be the easier route for you. But if you say, if you going off my criteria or another coach criteria, you'll be blind because of you're not sure the investors going, because I'm telling you what my investors know. But you have to know your own investors and what they invest in. By just having a conversation like this, hey, what will you invest in? You go shopping for what they're looking for. I think that's probably the best route. So now you're shopping with a list. I'm not sure about you, but going grocery shopping, it's easier with a list opposed to going blindly, because you gotta have the money before. And the capital raising process will be a lot easier. So why you know what that? So now you just raise capital. You just say, hey, this is what you asked for. Do you want to invest?
And we
Okay,
got
so
one
yeah.
of the most important questions. Unless there's a follow up, Richard.
Go ahead.
All right. Can you use regular platforms for crowdfunding? What's the answer there, Cornelius? Because there are some restrictions and opportunities there.
No, from my understanding, no, because actually FINRA have to approve your process of crowdfunding because of you dealing with non-accredited investors. There's more work when you're dealing with the general public than opposed to dealing with a credit investor. The SEC kind of evaluates differently. So I think like even if you go on, if you ever wonder, like for example, there's a site right here. Let me go right here. So that way for information, right? If you go to FINRA, right, FINRA has listed all the federal funded sites that that FINRA follows. So if you go here, you see that all the sites that actually crowdfunding sites out there available. These sites not all real estate. Some do new development. Some do movie theaters. Not all of them do it. For example, you see one of the most popular ones on here, like Crowdfund My Deal. This is our companies right here. We do crowdfunding. The one you probably seen 3 keys. Start Engine on here. You probably seen that Start Engine with so you see a lot of fours out there. So it's about probably less than 100 fours on it because more coming every day. I see some more like hospitality. So these crowdfunding portals have to get approved by FINRA and go through a process, a background check of the funds, how it's done, and we get audited multiple times over and over again to make sure that we're compliant, because why we're dealing with non-credit investors. So not every platform have the approval of FINRA to actually handle the funds from non-credit investors.
And to take it one step further, you absolutely can use the regular platforms for the Regulation D offerings, but you're not allowed at all for the regulation crowdfunding. Now, the way that the funding or the marketing actually gets set up is kind of the way that 3 keys it looked. The first question is, are you accredited? If the answer is yes, you click it, you go down the path of seeing the Regulation D offering and everything that is contained there. If the answer is no, you go down the route of seeing all the regulation crowdfunding offering information, and all that can be done within the same portal.
And well, kind of real quick. I want to make sure we have time to go through and bring in breakout rooms and have you answer specific questions in the breakout rooms. So actually I was able to get to work. You can go ahead and turn off the recording, John. Did you get it?